I've got Collette Woolnough here, Director of Inclusion at the Dubai British School, Jumeirah Park, a Talim school. With over 25 years in education, including 20 in senior leadership, Colette is a leading expert in diversity and inclusion. Her qualifications include a Master's in SEN and Leadership, alongside advanced certifications in dyslexia and educational testing. Colette has led a successful turnaround projects for UK schools and achieved outstanding Ofsted, BSO and DSIB ratings. Delighted to partner with the Inclusion Quality Mark and gain Centre of Excellence status for DBS JP. Colette is absolutely committed to fostering inclusivity, and she models best practices, empowers fellow educators, significantly enhancing student success and educational experiences. Colette, yours was the first school in the United Arab Emirates to achieve the Inclusive International School Award. So you're an absolute pioneer and a trailblazer in a region that is heading that way. Considering the interest that is clearly shown in the award since then, you and the team at your school must be very proud of what you have started and got the ball rolling.
Yeah, we are. Thank you. So full disclosure, I did in the UK, I did gain the IQM for my school in North Yorkshire many moons ago. So I had an advantage of knowing the value of working with the IQM and particularly the evaluation framework. And so when we engaged with you, I was ahead of the game in terms of knowing what could be available to us. For colleagues out there thinking about going through the IQM, one of the things that Kevin said that really resonated with me was that your approach, it's definitely assessment, it's definitely positive, it's definitely celebratory. We had our inspection about 2 months before we had our assessment, and it was a very different experience. So I just want to talk a little bit about the actual SER framework and how we approached it and the benefit that had. And Kevin asked me to talk about that deep dive and what difference that made. So for those of you in the UAE, you know the KHDA framework. It's very comprehensive. For those of you out of the UAE, we have a very prescriptive, comprehensive framework that we fill in on an annual basis. So we do an awful lot of self-evaluation. But the IQM, so we've got the 8 elements, as Kevin mentioned, and I did count the criteria. There are 74 criteria. And when you first look at it, it's like, gulp. But a lot of them for us was a crossover of things that we were looking at. So in some ways, you know, Kevin's comment about, you know, maybe in some ways a tick box, you know, you could think, oh, well, this is easy because we've got about 60 of those already written down in our cell. But actually what was brilliant was there was some really new questions and new statements for us to consider, and it allowed us to have a different spotlight and a different lens, and we really valued that. When we looked at it, that was one of the things that really helped us. One of the things that I looked at, so my role is director, I'm often looking at the needs of the children. I want to come on to that. But I think with the IQM, what I really liked and valued was it really looked at the whole organisation as an inclusive community. And we are, you know, but to actually zoom out and look at us in that way gave us a great sense of pride and a great celebration. And I was able to keep sharing with my SLT colleagues reminders. So, for example, our site staff have a celebration board, and that was something that we've passed every day. We think it's great. We vote for the site person, the cleaner or the security that's doing a fantastic job. But really to take a moment and say, that's our community. That is what inclusion looks like. Not only do we have, I think we've got 68 nationalities in our children, but if we look at the staff as well, we have a good number of staff. I would say definitely over 25 different nationalities in our staff. And it's about how do we include everybody in terms of making everybody feel welcomed and have that sense of belonging. And it was just little moments like looking at our iftar and knowing that we break iftar with everybody in terms of the school that we are. So that was definitely something that I felt that the sort of deep dive from IQM really supported us. And I know that that's a lot of other schools in Dubai. So I think that's something to pick out if you're going through this, really celebrate your community and look at how you do really work with your whole community and how you look after those people. And it's looking after, isn't it? We talk about well-being. So I really did feel that that's something that we looked at in a different way. So the benefit of that deep diving and then thinking about the actual process itself, how we could make practice more explicit. So while we were going through our IQM, I worked with a colleague of mine, Kerry. She worked very, very closely with me. And she's our Alternative Pathways coordinator. Now, we're always looking at new initiative. We're always talking about what we can do better. But actually, it was when we were having our conversation about IQM that there was a bit of a passion project that maybe was on her back burner that we brought to the fore. And it was through this process. And that was really, really looking at our big community events. We have huge community events that are just full of amazing noise and smells and visuals. And of course, what that is it's sensory overload for some of our children. So we brought in some of those projects. So literally through working with the IQM and thinking about that, we now have our quiet rooms. So we had a big Year 5 disco. We had a quiet room outside for the children to dip in and dip out as they needed. We had headphones actually in the hall. What was beautiful about that was that many of our neurotypical students actually came to borrow the headphones. And it just normalised the use of these tools that we need to sort of integrate and support our students. Our iftar, again, we had a quiet room, and we've got a huge event. So out here in Dubai, things are done bigger, better, bouncier, and they're just full on. And it was actually one of our parents who spoke to us and said, it's wonderful, but we can only ever manage 30 minutes because it's just too much for our little boy. And that was actually the origin of this particular nugget and this thinking that we wanted to do. And so in the end of November, when we have our Winter Wonderland, we're going to have our quiet room, we're going to have our headphones available, we're going to think about what we can do differently on behalf of the children so that those families can also enjoy the whole of the event and not just have to dip in and dip out according to their neurodiverse child. So that was definitely something that I wanted to share, that a different way of thinking through working through the SER allowed us to really kind of step away and look at things a little bit differently. Impact on stakeholders. Well, there is a confession, because here at JP we do things full on. So our 74 criteria, when I shared it out amongst the team, and going back to what you said, Kevin, we are a truly team approach to inclusion. And so they were helping me fill in the SER, and they went a little bit overboard. So I had to pull back and say, this is wonderful. You're really celebrating our school, but I did have to manage a couple of that. So perhaps when you're working with your teams, tell them really 1 or 2 points to express how inclusive they are fine. Maybe going to 20 or 30 is maybe not necessarily what's needed. Or if it is, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. But it did make our report about 100 pages long. So that was a kind of apology to the IQM team. But I do know our assessor read every word and celebrated our school. What was really lovely as well is that in the inspection framework here in Dubai, it's a 4-day inspection, and Inclusion does have their own inspector that's looking at inclusion and wellbeing. And obviously, you can't be outstanding if across the threads of curriculum assessment that inclusion isn't being represented. Of course it is. And our team are very good at representing what we do as an inclusive school. But what was really nice about our 2 days was it was just to celebrate inclusion. We weren't part of an inclusion, an inspection. We were the assessment. We were it. It was our day to celebrate. And all of my colleagues were there to support us. And that was a really, really special day. So in terms of the impact on stakeholders, colleagues, middle leaders, senior leaders just really leaned into the work that they were doing, but they just really celebrated the inclusion team as well. And there was a real buzz about the place, and people would come out of meetings telling me what they'd said and what they'd shared. And I had the confidence to just say, you go into the meeting, I'm not coming in, you got this, you just celebrate what we do as a school. But to have people coming out going, yeah, and I said this and I said this, and it was brilliant because I remembered that we did that. That also gave us a real buzz that came away from that. And then I have to say that when we were told not only had we passed IQM, but that we were considered a centre of excellence, I have to say it was just joyous to see people really celebrating and actually taking that really, really kind of to heart. It was just lovely. The conversations were amazing. And then more importantly, the impact it's had on our parents, because you know, our parents can often feel vulnerable. They're supporting their children. They feel like they're constantly fighting for the needs of their young people. They want to really, truly feel that their school is not just inclusive, but we were saying, look, we tell you we are. You come in, you see us when we're front facing, but someone's come in through the back door and they've really looked at whether what we say to you is actually really genuine. And a lot of our parents have just really celebrated that we have this award, and they're telling their friends that their school is really inclusive and what their children are getting is just, and it goes to the last point, and it's that sense of belonging. I think the fact that we invested in the award, the fact that we went through it and gained it, the fact that it's on our letterheads, that we're just celebrating that we are truly inclusive, who've just made our parents feel that it's not just lip service, that it genuinely is something that we value and hold dear to our heart. And I think that's what goes back to that sense of belonging, that actually everybody can see that we are genuinely inclusive. We mean what we say. It's on the tin. Internationally, children come and go, but our promise is that whether you're with us for 2 months or 10 years, you will get the same attention to your needs, whichever way it is. We want to do the best for you. And more importantly, we're always looking at how we can equip children, because they move around the world, they move from school to school. We want to make sure that their time with us is special, that we make a difference to them and their families, and that we pass them on to the next either place or stage in a really positive way, where they can just feel good and embrace their neurodiversity.
Tremendous, Colette. To those that are listening, and you go back to that Venn diagram at the start, you'll maybe understand why Colette's school is one concentric circle. Everyone belongs, everyone is fully involved, and it's by design. Where they looked at themselves and they took a chance to do a deep dive, they found lots of strengths, but they're the kind of school that finds a way of enhancing provision. They know they are good, and they could turn good into very good and outstanding by having the right mindset. I know that your assessor, Sue White, was blown away. Every time she thought you had finished, you turned a new chapter and said, Sue, we're not done. Here's a new group to speak and meet with you. And of course, then your report began to grow and grow. But it really was quality and quantity in measure. And you are rightly the first school in the UAE to achieve the award. And I'm sure there'll be many more turning towards you, Colette, asking for advice and steering this. I'm delighted to have you on board and give us that insight. Thank you very much.